Sheps. Now, Sheps is traditionally translated as ancestor or great ancestor. You usually see a madut where a person is sitting on a seat holding the flail, the nakaka, or sometimes you don't see them holding the flail. Now, it's traditionally translated as enlightened ancestor. What's not understood is that process of becoming an enlightened ancestor, that spiritual work, is also connected to wealth. Wealth is another definition of Sheps. Sheps also means land ownership, wealth. We have to understand what the true definition of wealth is. We've been purposefully misled, especially in the last 50, 60 years. Wealth is now, was then, and will always be in the land. It will always be based on the resources that you grow on the land. Your biggest stock market company, let's talk about Apple for a second. Let's say Apple. Let's even say Amazon. Where do the materials that they build their products come from? Where do those metals come from? Where does the rubber, and I'm not talking about the plastics, where do the actual metals, the things that coat the wiring, the things that make technology or technological advancement possible in the Western world are based on natural occurring metals, crystals, and resources that you find in the earth and in nature. So true wealth is in owning land, because on land, I can grow food. On land, I can grow materials that are going to build other things. I can find everything I need on the land. And the relationship in Kemet with wealth is that land is connected to status, because now if I'm able to grow food, I'm able to feed more people. Let's go back to the practicality of life in Black ancestral traditions in Kemet with the 14 call of Ra. Are you feeding the people? Are you keeping them secure? And now when I have land and I'm able to feed multiple people, because in spiritual development, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your race, one of the things we need to overcome first is selfishness. So if I'm feeding multiple people across the land, across this, or in my village, in my nation, in my nome, in my town, in my sepat, and I'm feeding multiple people, from a Kemetic perspective, that was viewed as you deserve high status. You deserve high recognition for your work. How do we know that it's dealing with food and growing food? Well, because in some of the images, the Sheps madut, the ancestral madut, is holding a flail, the nakaka, which also the king holds. And we know that when the king makes that authority, Wusir makes that authority, that flail is not just about discipline. The flail is also a item used in the cultivation of food, of beating the grains. And it is through grains that you really, truly establish civilization. That is what the astrological texts tell us, especially in ancient Kemet, the age of Virgo, where you see Aset there holding the grain of wheat. It is grains that establish civilization, because you need a surplus of food. You need food to stabilize. Once again, this idea that people do today of telling people to study astrology, go meditate and look at the stars and what's your astrology sign, but people can't eat. That's not a Black ancestral perspective. So in order for me to stabilize civilization so that we can study astronomy and mathematics and geometry, I need to have a stable food supply. So you need grains, as they still are today, useful, and the carbohydrates and all of those details of it, which my wife will get into with the GLAD diet, will get into why it's so important and why our body is built for that, and why also she'll go even deeper into why it establishes civilization. And establishing civilization means what? Establishing order. Ma'at. Practical means, practical terms. Your wealth buys land today. Your entrepreneurship buys, not real estate. Because we've been conned with that. They got us wanting to buy buildings and homes and not land. They misguide us when they say, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, they say, Bill Gates just spent this amount of money on farmland. You don't think nothing of it because you thought he bought farmland. He bought land. He bought land, massive land, where he can grow food and build houses and build community and build nations. You get your wealth up, unite with others to buy land, to build resources so that we can build the institutions and we can set up security through food and through armed self-defense for our people. Is that not what Black people need now? We need that. We need Sheps. Another reason why there's a relationship between the Sheps as great ancestors and the Sheps Madut as material and land is because most wealth is inherited. Most wealth is inherited. Many of these powerful, rich families today in the world, they are inheriting generational, what they call generational wealth, passing down the land. What are you going to pass down? Home ownership in the black community has dropped since the 1970s. You don't really own no land anymore. And the land is more in the power now of people who collectively, not individually, but collectively do not have your best interests. Tap into the Sheps.
The future is here.